The late August air in Maple Creek, Illinois, was thick enough to drink. It clung to the immaculate colonial-style houses, beaded on the blades of perfectly manicured lawns, and seeped through the window screens of Olivia Wallace's home office. Inside, the air conditioning hummed a monotonous, sterile counterpoint to the drone of cicadas outside. It was a sound Olivia had come to associate with a very specific kind of loneliness, the kind that exists in a beautiful, well-appointed room filled with the ghosts of unfinished work. On her drafting table, the blueprints for the Henderson residence lay pristine and precise. A sprawling six-bedroom modern farmhouse designed to be a sanctuary of light and open space. Olivia traced a finger along the line designating the great room, a space intended for laughter and family gatherings. She could design these spaces with an almost spiritual clarity, envisioning the flow of life within them. Yet in her own house, the flow had long since stagnated, turning into a series of quiet, shallow pools. Her own home, a two-story brick colonial on Poplar Lane, was a testament to the Wallace family's success, or rather, Michael's. It was the kind of house featured in local lifestyle magazines, a physical manifestation of the American dream that Maple Creek sold so well. Olivia had chosen the paint colors, the Belgian linen curtains, the reclaimed oak for the floors. She had nurtured the hydrangeas in the front garden until they bloomed in fat, showy heads of blue and purple. But lately, she felt like the curator of a museum dedicated to a life she was no longer living. Michael was a financial advisor, a pillar of the community, a man whose public persona was as solid and dependable as the brick facade of their home. He managed the wealth of Maple Creek's most prominent families, his success built on an aura of unshakable stability. But that stability had become a form of absence. He was a phantom in his own home, arriving late, his presence announced by the clink of his keys in the ceramic bowl by the door, and leaving early, a ghost of coffee-scented air in his wake. Their conversations had become logistical exchanges about their 14-year-old son Leo or the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. The emotional architecture of their marriage was crumbling from the inside out, but the exterior remained flawless. Leo was at summer camp, a 3-week stint that was supposed to give Olivia and Michael a chance to reconnect. Instead, it had amplified the silence. The house was too big, too quiet. The silence pressed in on her, making the hum of the refrigerator sound like a roar. This afternoon, the silence felt particularly malevolent. Michael had called an hour ago to say he was stuck in the city, a last-minute client dinner. It was a familiar refrain. Disappointment, once a sharp sting, had dulled to a chronic, low-grade ache. Olivia pushed away from the drafting table and walked into the kitchen, the cool oak floorboards a relief against her bare feet. She poured a glass of water, watching the condensation trail down the side. On the gleaming quartz countertop sat the family iPad, a sleek silver rectangle they used for recipes, news, and Leo's homework. Michael had used it last night to look up stock futures, he'd said. She picked it up, intending to browse for a new recipe, something complex and distracting. She opened the web browser, but it was the message app that caught her eye. A green bubble with a number 1 hovered over it. A message from Leo, perhaps? She talked it. The screen refreshed, and a conversation thread appeared. It was not from Leo. The name at the top was Ava. Olivia didn't know an Ava. The last message, sent just 20 minutes ago, glowed on the screen. Ava, can't stop thinking about last night. You are a miracle. Olivia's heart didn't drop. It seized, a sudden, violent clench in her chest that stole her breath. Her fingers went cold. She scrolled up. Her thumb moved with a mechanical, detached tremor, revealing a history that stretched back for months. Michael, this dinner is a drag. Wish I was with you. Ava, I'm in my PJs with a bottle of wine. The other half is waiting for you. Michael, don't tempt me. I might actually walk out of here. Another from weeks ago. You make me feel seen. I don't think anyone's ever seen me before. Michael, the feeling is mutual, all of it. The words were a foreign language, describing an intimacy she hadn't shared with her husband in years. It wasn't just physical. The messages were laced with shared jokes, complaints about work, confessions of vulnerability. He was building a life with this person, a life made of stolen moments and glowing blue text. The last night in the most recent message was not a client dinner. It was a lie, one of many in a long, carefully constructed chain. The air conditioner hummed on, oblivious. The cicadas outside continued their relentless, high-pitched song. Olivia stood frozen in her perfect kitchen, the cold glass of water forgotten in her hand, the tablet glowing with the methodical destruction of her world. It wasn't a loud explosion. It was a silent, digital demolition, leaving her standing in the rubble of what she had believed was her life. She lowered the iPad to the counter, the click of the metal against the quartz, the only sound in the crushing silence. The house, her beautiful, curated house, had never felt so empty. Numbness is a strange mercy. It descended on Olivia like a thick fog, muffling the sharp edges of pain, turning the screaming in her head into a dull, distant roar. She moved through the house with a slow, deliberate grace, as if she were wading through deep water. She put the iPad back exactly where she found it. She washed her water glass, dried it, and placed it in the cupboard. Each small domestic act was an anchor, a desperate attempt to pretend the ground beneath her hadn't just given way. She retreated to her office, but the blueprints for the Henderson house now looked like a cruel joke, a home built on honesty and light. She closed the door and sat in her chair, staring out the window at the setting sun. The sky was bruised with purples and oranges, a beautiful, violent end to the day. For the first time, she saw the cracks in her own design, not the Hendersons, but her own life's. She had designed a beautiful facade, a structurally sound exterior, but had neglected the foundation until it was too late. The load-bearing walls of trust had been pulverized. When Michael's car finally crunched onto the gravel driveway just after 11, the numbness began to recede, replaced by a cold, vibrating anger. It was a foreign feeling. Olivia was a peacekeeper, a smoother of rough edges. Anger was an emotion she pathologized in others and suppressed in herself. Now it felt like a vital organ, pumping adrenaline through her veins. She heard his keys in the bowl, the soft thud of his briefcase on the floor. He walked into the kitchen, the familiar rhythm of his return home now sinister. "Liv?" he called out, his voice tired. "You still up?" She didn't answer. She heard him open the fridge, the pop of a beer bottle. A moment later, he appeared in the doorway of her office, silhouetted against the hall light. "Hey," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Long day. Peterson is thinking of moving his entire portfolio. Had to talk him off the ledge." The lie was so easy, so practiced. It slid from his lips with the smooth confidence of a man who believed his own fictions. Olivia turned her chair to face him. The dim light of her desk lamp cast long shadows across her face, hiding her expression. "How was dinner?" she asked, her voice unnervingly calm. "The usual," he shrugged, taking a sip of his beer. He looked at her more closely. "You okay? You seem quiet." "I'm fine," she said, the words tasting like ash. She paused, letting the silence stretch. "Michael, who is Ava?" The name hung in the air between them, small and lethal. Michael's posture changed instantly. The casual slouch vanished. He stood up straight, his hand tightening on the beer bottle. A flicker of something, fear, guilt, crossed his face before being replaced by a mask of weary confusion. "Ava?" he repeated, as if the name were a word he'd never heard. "She's on my team at the office, junior analyst. Why?" "Don't lie to me," Olivia said, her voice still quiet, but now edged with steel. "I saw the messages, on the iPad." The mask shattered. For a split second, she saw pure, unadulterated panic in his eyes. He looked like a cornered animal. Then the walls went up again, this time built of defensiveness. "You went through my messages?" he shot back, his voice rising. He was trying to pivot, to make her the aggressor. It was a tactic as old as betrayal itself. "They were on the family iPad, Michael. They weren't exactly hidden," she said, her calm beginning to fray. "She thinks you're a miracle. You wished you were with her instead of at your client dinner. You spent last night with her." Each statement was a flat, hard stone thrown into the placid surface of their life. He looked away, running a hand through his hair. He walked out of the office and into the living room, a retreat. Olivia followed him. "Liv, it's not what you think," he began, turning to face her. He was employing his soothing the client voice, calm, reasonable, patronizing. "It's complicated. Work has been intense. Ava and I, we connected. We talk. That's all." "That is not all," Olivia said, the anger finally breaking through, hot and sharp. "I read what you wrote, Michael. The feeling is mutual, all of it. That isn't just talking. That's a relationship. You are having an affair." "An affair?" He laughed, a short, incredulous bark. "Don't be so dramatic. It was a mistake. A couple of stupid moments that didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" The words were a physical blow. The months of lies, the shared intimacy, the emotional world he had built with someone else, all dismissed as meaningless. He wasn't just lying to her, he was trying to rewrite her reality, to make her feel hysterical for reacting to the truth. "It meant enough for you to lie to me every single day," she said, her voice trembling now. "It meant enough for you to be with her last night while I was here in this house you supposedly come home to." "Okay, fine," he snapped, his composure finally cracking. "It happened. It was a lapse in judgment. I'm stressed, Olivia. The market is a mess. I've got clients breathing down my neck, and I come home and it's just quiet. It's always so quiet here." He was blaming the silence he had helped create. He was blaming the house, the life they had built, for his own betrayal. The injustice of it was staggering. It knocked the air from her lungs. "So this is my fault?" she whispered, the question laced with disbelief. "Because I'm quiet?" "No, I'm not saying that," he backpedaled, seeing he'd gone too far. "Look, I messed up. I'm sorry. I'll end it. I'll end it tomorrow. It's over. It meant nothing, I swear." He tried to step toward her, to touch her arm, but Olivia flinched back as if from a hot flame. His apology was hollow, a strategic maneuver, not an act of contrition. He was sorry he got caught. In that moment, staring at the man she had loved for nearly 2 decades, Olivia felt an isolation so profound, it was like standing at the edge of a cliff in the dark. He wasn't her partner. He was her adversary. She turned and walked away from him, up the stairs, each step heavy with the weight of her shattered world. She closed their bedroom door behind her, locking it. The click of the lock was a definitive, final sound. It was the first boundary she had drawn in years. Downstairs, Michael was left standing alone in the beautiful, silent living room, the architect of his own desolation. Sleep was impossible. Olivia lay awake in the king-sized bed that suddenly felt vast and empty, the locked door a flimsy barricade against the wreckage of her life downstairs. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside the window sounded like a footstep, an accusation. Michael had eventually retreated to the guest room, a silent admission of the chasm that had opened between them. The morning arrived not with the gentle glow of dawn, but with a harsh, gray light that made everything in the room look stark and unfamiliar. Olivia's mind, deprived of rest, was a frantic hive of thoughts. The words from the text echoed in a relentless loop, intertwined with Michael's dismissive, self-serving excuses. It didn't mean anything. Don't be so dramatic. He had tried to gaslight her, to shrink her legitimate pain into a manageable, hysterical outburst. She felt utterly, terrifyingly alone. Her best friend, Chloe, was a rock, but she was in Chicago. And this felt too raw, too shameful to put into a phone call just yet. Her parents in Oregon would be horrified, their quiet 50-year marriage a stark contrast to this sordid mess. They would offer love, but also a kind of bewildered pity she couldn't bear. Then a thought began to form, a desperate, illogical idea born of panic and a lifetime of conditioning. Eleanor. Eleanor's mother, Eleanor Wallace, was a force of nature. A woman of iron will and impeccable social standing, she was the matriarch of not just her family, but in many ways of Maple Creek itself. Her approval was a currency, and Olivia, for all her quiet independence, had always craved it. Eleanor prized family, loyalty, and reputation above all else. She saw the world in terms of strength and weakness, order and chaos. The logic, twisted as it was, seemed clear to Olivia's sleep-deprived brain. Eleanor would be appalled by Michael's behavior. She would see it as a betrayal of the Wallace name, a threat to the family unit she held so sacred. She would be an ally. She would be the one person with the authority to bring Michael to heel, to make him understand the gravity of what he had done. Olivia envisioned Eleanor, in her righteous fury, descending upon her son and forcing him to confront the consequences. It was a fantasy of rescue, a yearning for a powerful maternal figure to step in and fix what was broken. She needed an ally, someone on the inside. She needed someone to validate her pain, to tell her she wasn't being dramatic, that this was as catastrophic as it felt. Before she could second-guess the impulse, she was downstairs in her office, her cell phone in her hand. The house was still. Michael had already left for work, a cowardly escape. She found Eleanor's number in her contacts and pressed the call button. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Eleanor answered on the second ring, her voice as crisp and polished as ever. "Olivia, darling, to what do I owe the pleasure this early?" "Eleanor," Olivia began, her voice shaking slightly. She took a breath to steady herself. "I'm sorry to call so early. Is this a bad time?" "Not at all. I'm just finishing my tea and reading the journal. What is it? You sound upset." There was a note of clinical concern in her voice, the kind one might use for a neighbor's sick cat. Something has happened," Olivia stammered, the words catching in her throat. "It's Michael." The line was silent for a moment. "Is he all right? Has there been an accident?" "No, he's fine, physically." Olivia squeezed her eyes shut, the shame and pain washing over her. "Eleanor, he's having an affair." She said it. The secret was out, released into the world. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but the faint hiss of the phone line. Olivia held her breath, waiting for the explosion of maternal rage, the words of comfort and solidarity. What came instead was a cool, controlled exhale. "I see," Eleanor said, her voice devoid of any discernible emotion. It was the voice of a CEO hearing about a minor supply chain disruption. "Olivia, where are you right now?" "I'm at home, in my office." "And Michael?" "He left for work. I confronted him last night." "And what precisely did you say?" Eleanor's tone had shifted. It was no longer concerned. It was forensic. She was gathering data. "I told him I knew. I saw messages." "Messages?" Eleanor interrupted, a faint note of disapproval in her voice. "You were looking through his things." The question was a subtle dart, and it found its mark. "They were on the family iPad, Eleanor. I stumbled upon them." "Stumble?" Eleanor repeated, the word dripping with skepticism. "Olivia, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What you do next is extremely important. This is a delicate situation." Delicate, not devastating, not heartbreaking, delicate. "First," Eleanor continued, her voice low and conspiratorial, "you will not speak of this to anyone else. Not Chloe, not your parents, no one. Do you understand? This is a private family matter. It must be handled internally." Olivia murmured a weak, "Okay." Second, you need to understand that men like Michael, successful men, are under enormous pressure. They have weaknesses. Sometimes they make foolish, regrettable mistakes. It doesn't mean anything fundamental has changed. It was an echo of Michael's own words. It didn't mean anything. Olivia felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't the conversation she had imagined. Where was the outrage on her behalf? But he lied to me, Eleanor, for months.
Of course he lied, Eleanor said with a sigh of weary impatience, as if explaining a simple but tiresome concept. He was trying to protect you. And himself, yes. It was a lapse in judgment, not a declaration of war. The question now is not about what happened, but about what we are going to do to ensure the stability of this family, for Leo's sake, if nothing else. The mention of Leo was a calculated blow. Eleanor was reframing the issue. It was no longer about betrayal, but about Olivia's duty as a mother and a wife. "What do you want me to do?" Olivia asked, her voice small. The hope that had propelled her to make the call was rapidly curdling into dread. "For now, nothing," Eleanor commanded. "You will go about your day. You will be calm. When Michael comes home, you will be civil. Do not provoke him. Do not create more drama. I will speak with Michael myself. I will handle this. We will get through it, but it requires strategy, not emotion." Strategy, not emotion. The words landed like a slap. Her pain, her shattered trust, her grief, they were all being dismissed as emotion, an inconvenient variable in Eleanor's damage control equation. "Olivia?" Eleanor's voice sharpened. "Are you with me?" "Yes," Olivia whispered. "I'm with you." "Good. Stay strong and stay quiet." The line went dead. Olivia lowered the phone from her ear, her hand trembling. She had called her mother-in-law seeking a comforting embrace and had received a cold, strategic battle plan. She had hoped for an ally and had found a general, but it was horrifyingly clear that she was not the one Eleanor was fighting for. She was just a piece on the board, a variable to be managed. The isolation she felt before the call was nothing compared to the chilling, profound loneliness that engulfed her now. She hadn't just been betrayed by her husband. She had been betrayed by the one person she thought would defend the sanctity of their family. The hours after the call to Eleanor were a masterclass in psychological whiplash. Olivia's mind replayed the conversation, each of her mother-in-law's cool, calculated words chipping away at her sense of reality. Strategy, not emotion. Don't provoke him. I will handle this. Eleanor had not offered solace. She had issued directives. She had taken Olivia's raw, gaping wound and slapped a sterile, corporate-approved bandage over it, demanding it heal quietly and without making a mess. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage. Olivia was an actress, cast in a role she didn't want, the composed, understanding wife. She moved through the rooms, tidying things that were already tidy, her hands performing a pantomime of normalcy while her mind screamed. She tried to work on the Henderson blueprints, but the clean lines and open spaces mocked her. She was designing a happy home for strangers while her own was a contaminated site. Late in the afternoon, her phone buzzed. It was her brother, Ben. His name on the screen was a lifeline. "Hey, Liv." His voice was warm, a familiar comfort from a world before Maple Creek, before Michael, before Ava. "Just calling to check in. Mom said you sounded a little off last time you talked." Olivia's resolve, so carefully constructed under Eleanor's orders, crumbled. The dam of her composure broke, and a sob escaped, ugly and raw. "Whoa, Liv, what's wrong?" Ben's voice sharpened with immediate concern. "Ben," she choked out, the name a plea, "everything's wrong." And so, she broke Eleanor's first and most important rule. She told him. The words tumbled out in a torrent of grief and rage. The texts, Michael's pathetic excuses, the hollow apologies, and then the worst of it, the chilling phone call with Eleanor. On the other end of the line, Ben was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight with a cold fury that was more validating to Olivia than 1,000 expressions of sympathy. "That woman," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "So, let me get this straight. Her son cheats, lies, and gets caught, and her first instinct is to tell you to calm down and handle it with strategy? She said he was trying to protect me, Olivia whispered, the absurdity of it hitting her anew. Protect you? He was protecting himself, and she's protecting him. It's the Wallace playbook, Liv. Circle the wagons, protect the brand, and to hell with whoever gets run over. I can't believe you're sitting there taking orders from her. I don't know what else to do, Olivia confessed, her voice thick with despair. I feel like I'm going crazy.
You're not crazy, Ben, said fiercely. You're being manipulated by both of them. This isn't a delicate situation. It's a 5-alarm fire, and they're asking you to pretend you don't smell the smoke. Don't you let them do that to you. His anger was a balm. It was the reaction she had craved from Eleanor, righteous, unequivocal, and entirely on her side. For the first time in 24 hours, she felt a flicker of strength. She wasn't hysterical. She was wounded, and her wound was real. What should I do? She asked. For starters, stop listening to Queen Eleanor. Second, call Chloe. You need a friend right now. And third, you need to decide what you want, not what they want you to want. Don't worry about Leo or the house or the goddamn Wallace reputation for 5 minutes. What do you need to survive this? The conversation with Ben was a bracing tonic. It cleared some of the fog of manipulation and reminded her that there was a world outside the suffocating bubble of Maple Creek, a world where betrayal was called betrayal and pain was not an inconvenience. But the battle lines had been drawn. The moment she confided in Ben, she had violated the terms of Eleanor's ceasefire, and Eleanor, Olivia knew, did not tolerate insubordination. The retaliation was swift and subtle. The next day, Olivia received a text from a friend on the PTA, a woman she considered an acquaintance at best. Brenda, so sorry to hear you and Michael are going through a rough patch. Eleanor mentioned you were under a lot of stress. Let me know if you need anything. Olivia stared at the message, her blood running cold. Eleanor mentioned. The whisper campaign had begun. Eleanor wasn't shouting from the rooftops. She was planting seeds, carefully curating a narrative. Olivia wasn't the victim of infidelity. She was a woman under a lot of stress, a euphemism that could mean anything: unstable, difficult, hysterical. It was a masterful, preemptive strike designed to discredit Olivia before she could ever tell her own story. The feud had begun. It wasn't a war of loud, angry phone calls, at least not yet. It was a quiet, insidious war of narratives, fought in text messages and hushed phone calls across the manicured lawns of Maple Creek. That evening, Michael came home and attempted a conversation. He had clearly been coached by his mother. He was apologetic, but in a detached, formal way. He spoke of making amends and rebuilding trust and suggested they start marriage counseling. He never mentioned Ava's name. It was a sterile, impersonal script. I've ended it, he said, standing in the kitchen, a careful 6 feet away from her. I told her it was a mistake and it's over. Just like that? Olivia asked, her voice flat. Was she sad to hear the miracle was over? Michael flinched. Don't do that, Liv. Eleanor said we need to focus on moving forward. Eleanor doesn't get a vote, Olivia snapped, the fire from Ben's phone call still smoldering inside her. This is about you and me, and you can't even look me in the eye and tell me what you did. You talk about it like it was a bad business deal you just closed. What do you want me to do? Grovel? He asked, his frustration rising. I said I'm sorry. I want you to feel something, she cried, the words torn from her. I want you to show 1 ounce of genuine remorse for what you did to me, to us, not just regret that your mother had to get involved. The argument went nowhere, a circular dance of her raw pain and his scripted contrition. It ended with him retreating to the guest room once more, the space between them solidifying into a permanent, uncrossable border. Later that night, as Olivia lay in bed, her phone rang. It was an Oregon number, her mother. Her heart sank. Olivia, honey? Ben just called us. Her mother's voice was tight with worry. He told us what's going on. "Oh, sweetie, why didn't you call us?" "I didn't want to worry you," Olivia said, the lie thin and brittle. "Well, your father is fit to be tied," her mother said. "He wants to get on a plane tomorrow. He just kept saying, 'No daughter of mine is going to be treated like that.' And that woman, Eleanor, Ben told us what she said. How dare she?" The two families were now officially engaged. The Wallaces, with their strategy of containment and image control, and her own family, the Holbrooks, with their straightforward, protective fury. The private, intimate pain of a marriage's collapse had metastasized. It was no longer just Olivia's crisis. It was the Wallace-Holbrook feud, and she was standing at the epicenter of the coming storm. The storm broke not in a dramatic confrontation, but in the most mundane of modern arenas, a private Facebook group. Maple Creek Neighbors was a digital town square, a place for recommending plumbers, announcing bake sales, and, most potently, trading gossip under a thin veil of community concern. It started with a single, innocuously worded post from a woman Olivia vaguely knew from the library fundraiser. "Thinking of our neighbors going through tough times. Marriage is hard work, and sometimes outside pressures can make it impossible. Let's all remember to be kind." It was a classic Maple Creek post, vague enough for plausible deniability, yet specific enough for anyone in the know to understand exactly who and what it was about. Within an hour, the comments started to accumulate. "Sending strength. So true. Some people just don't appreciate what they have at home." This was from one of Eleanor's closest friends on the charity board. "Absolutely. Especially when there are kids involved. You have to think of the kids." "I heard from Brenda that things have been really strained at the Wallace house for a while. So sad. Olivia always seemed so put together." The use of the past tense was a scalpel. Seemed. Olivia sat on her couch, scrolling through the comments with a sickening sense of vertigo. This was Eleanor's handiwork, a masterclass in narrative warfare. She wasn't being accused of anything outright. She was being subtly painted as the source of the strain, the unstable element in the equation. Michael's infidelity was being bleached out of the story, replaced by a vague, sympathetic narrative about a high-powered man and his difficult, stressed-out wife. Her phone buzzed. It was Chloe. "Liv, have you seen the Maple Creek Facebook page? It's disgusting. It's like a public stoning by 1,000 little passive-aggressive comments." "I'm reading it now," Olivia said, her voice hollow. "I feel like I'm going to be sick." "This has Eleanor's fingerprints all over it," Chloe said, her voice sharp with anger. "She's framing you. Don't you dare let her. You need to get out of that house. Come stay with me in the city for a few days. You need to breathe air that isn't 90% hypocrisy." The thought was tempting, a door opening out of her prison. But leaving felt like ceding the territory, admitting defeat. "Leo comes home from camp in 4 days," Olivia said. "I have to be here. I have to hold it together for him." "Holding it together doesn't mean letting them walk all over you," Chloe countered. "What about Michael in all this? Is he just letting his mother do this?" That was the question that haunted Olivia. Michael was a ghost. He left before she woke, came home late, and communicated in terse, functional texts. He was letting his mother fight his battles, hiding behind her formidable social shield while Olivia was being publicly dissected. His silence was not neutrality, it was complicity. The digital whispers soon bled into the real world. A trip to the grocery store, once a mindless chore, became a gauntlet. Olivia felt the stares, the sudden silences when she walked down an aisle. People who had always greeted her with warm smiles now offered tight, pitying looks, or worse, avoided eye contact altogether. Brenda, the PTA mom, saw her near the dairy case and gave her a wide-eyed, sympathetic head tilt, as if Olivia were recovering from a long illness. The final straw came in the form of a blog post. The Maple Creek Ledger, a local online publication run by a woman named Sarah Jane, who fancied herself a suburban journalist, posted an article titled "Trouble in Paradise on Poplar Lane." It was a masterpiece of innuendo. It didn't name names, but it didn't have to. It spoke of a prominent Maple Creek financial advisor and his architect wife. It quoted anonymous friends of the family who expressed concern for the couple's long-standing issues and the toll it's taken on the wife. There was a single devastating sentence that mentioned rumors of a workplace entanglement, but it was quickly buried under paragraphs about the pressures of success and the importance of family resilience. The article painted a portrait of a tragic, inevitable crumbling, with Olivia cast as the fragile, central figure who was, perhaps, not quite up to the demands of being a Wallace. When she read it, something inside Olivia snapped. The numbness, the grief, the fear, they all coalesced into a single, clarifying point of cold, hard rage. They were erasing her. They were taking her legitimate pain and twisting it into a story where she was the problem. They were turning her into a caricature, the unstable wife. She picked up her phone and dialed Michael's number. He answered on the first ring, his voice cautious. "Olivia? Have you seen it?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. "The Maple Creek Ledger." A pause. "Yeah, Eleanor sent it to me." "And?" she pressed. "What are you going to do about it?" "What is there to do?" he said, his voice laced with a weary resignation that infuriated her. "It's just gossip, Liv. It'll blow over." "Blow over?" she repeated, her voice rising with disbelief. "Michael, your mother is systematically destroying my reputation in this town to protect you, and you're telling me it will blow over? This isn't gossip. This is a character assassination, and you are letting it happen." "It's not like that," he argued weakly. "She's just trying to manage the situation." "She's not managing it, she's manipulating it. And you are a coward. You cheated on me, and now you're hiding behind your mother's skirts while she throws me to the wolves. Is this who you are, Michael? Is this the man I married?" The line went silent. She had finally said it, the question that had been lurking beneath the surface for days. I don't know what you want from me," he finally stammered. "I want you to be a man," she shot back. "I want you to stand up and tell the truth. Tell your mother to stop. Tell the world that you broke our marriage, not me. But you won't, will you? Because you care more about your image than you do about me or the truth." She didn't wait for an answer. She hung up the phone, her hand shaking. The digital circus had reached its peak, and in the harsh glare of the public spotlight, she saw everything with a painful, terrible clarity. She was alone in this fight. If she wanted to reclaim her own story, she would have to write it herself. The era of the peacekeeper was over. The day Leo was due back from camp loomed over Olivia like a deadline. The house had to be transformed from a Cold War battleground back into a home. The air, thick with resentment and unspoken accusations, needed to be purified. It was an impossible task. She spent the morning frantically cleaning, scrubbing countertops that were already spotless, vacuuming invisible dust from the rugs. It was a physical manifestation of her mental state, a desperate attempt to impose order on chaos. With every spray of cleaner, she was trying to wipe away the stain of the past week, the memory of the Facebook comments, the sting of the blog post. Michael arrived home early that afternoon, a rare occurrence. He walked into the kitchen where Olivia was arranging a bouquet of grocery store flowers in a vase, another prop for their stage play of normalcy. "We need to talk," he said, his voice subdued. He didn't look at her, focusing instead on a spot on the floor. "About Leo." "I know," Olivia said, snipping the stem of a lily with more force than necessary. "We have to pretend." "It's not about pretending," he said, finally meeting her eyes. His were shadowed, tired. For the first time, she saw a flicker of something beyond defensiveness, a hint of genuine distress. It's about protecting him. Eleanor thinks, she thinks, it would be best if we presented a united front, especially now, with all of the talk. "A united front," Olivia repeated, the words flat and bitter. You mean we stand together and smile while the whole town pities me for being the stressed wife who drove her husband away? That's not what's happening, he insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? She put the shears down and turned to face him fully. Michael, I am being publicly dismantled, and you're quoting your mother's PR strategy to me. Leo is smart. He's going to feel the tension. A united front of two people who can barely stand to be in the same room is a lie he will see right through. So what do we do? He asked, a note of real helplessness in his voice. We can't tell him.
No, she agreed. The thought of poisoning Leo's world with this adult ugliness making her physically ill. We can't tell him, but we also can't lie. We just have to be quiet, calm. We give him a peaceful end to his summer. We can do that much for him. It was a truce, a temporary ceasefire for the sake of their son. A fragile peace settled over the house as they waited for the camp bus to arrive. When it finally pulled up at the corner, Olivia and Michael walked out to meet it together, a carefully calibrated foot of space between them. Leo tumbled off the bus, tanned and vibrant, his hair sun-bleached, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He was a whirlwind of energy and stories about campfires, canoe races, and a legendary prank involving shaving cream. Seeing him so full of uncomplicated joy was like a punch to the gut for Olivia. This was what was at stake, this innocent, beautiful world of his. For the next 2 days, they played their parts. They listened to Leo's stories over dinner. Michael helped him with a model rocket in the backyard. Olivia made his favorite pancakes for breakfast. They were a family, performing a flawless imitation of their former selves. But the effort was monumental. Every shared smile was a strain, every casual conversation a carefully navigated minefield. Olivia felt as though she were holding her breath underwater, the pressure building in her chest with every passing hour. The silence between her and Michael was the loudest thing in the house. When Leo was in his room, the air crackled with unspoken words. They moved around each other with the cautious choreography of strangers, their lives reduced to a series of logistical maneuvers to avoid being alone together. On the third night, the facade began to crack. They were cleaning up after dinner, Leo upstairs on a video call with a camp friend. "My mother called," Michael said quietly, scrubbing a plate with unnecessary vigor. "She wants to know if we'll be at the Founders' Day Gala on Saturday." Olivia froze, her hands submerged in the warm, soapy water of the sink. The Founders' Day Gala. It was the crown jewel of the Maple Creek social calendar, a black tie event held at the Historical Society, attended by everyone who was anyone. It was Eleanor's domain. "Why would she ask that?" Olivia said, her voice low. "She knows what's going on." "That's exactly why she's asking," Michael said, not looking at her. "She thinks it's the perfect opportunity for us to be seen together, publicly, to put all the rumors to rest. A show of strength. A show." Olivia pulled her hands from the water, soap suds dripping onto the floor. The chill she felt had nothing to do with the water. Eleanor wasn't just managing the narrative anymore. She was directing a full-blown production, and she wanted Olivia and Michael as her lead actors. The gala would be the climax of her campaign, the public unveiling of the reconciled, strong, untouchable Wallace family. "No," Olivia said, the word coming out sharp and final. Michael stopped scrubbing. He turned to her, his face a mixture of frustration and pleading. "Liv, please, just think about it. It would make things so much easier. We go, we smile for a few pictures, we talk to a few people, and it's over. The story dies." "The story doesn't die, Michael. It just gets rewritten into a version that makes you and your mother happy," she said, her voice shaking with a sudden surge of fury. "I will not be paraded around that party like a show pony. I will not stand there and smile and let Eleanor pat me on the back for being such a good, forgiving little wife while everyone whispers behind their hands. I will not be a prop in your mother's psychodrama." "It's not a psychodrama," he shot back, his voice rising. "It's our life, and it's a mess. She's just trying to help us clean it up.
By sweeping the truth under $1,000 a plate dinner? Olivia's laugh was harsh, humorless. This isn't about us, Michael. This is about her. It's about the Wallace name, the Wallace reputation. I am just a supporting character in the grand saga of your family's perfect image. That's not fair. Fair, she cried, the last of her control shattering. You want to talk about fair? You sleep with another woman, you lie to my face, you let your mother publicly humiliate me, and you have the audacity to talk to me about what's fair. There is nothing fair about any of this.
A floorboard creaked upstairs. They both froze, their angry words hanging in the air like poison. Leo, he must have heard them. The fight drained out of Olivia, replaced by a wave of cold, sick shame. They had failed their one simple task, to protect him. She turned away from Michael, leaning her hands on the counter, her head bowed. "Get out," she whispered. "Liv, just get out of the kitchen," she said, her voice breaking. "Go, please." He hesitated for a moment, then turned and left without another word. Olivia stood alone, the scent of lemon soap and stale anger filling her lungs. The fragile truce was over, and the gala, she knew with a dreadful certainty, was unavoidable. It was a summons from the Queen, and defiance would have consequences she wasn't yet ready to face. She was being pushed toward a stage, and she didn't know if she had the strength to refuse her part. The days leading up to the Founders' Day Gala were a slow-motion nightmare. The air in the house was thick with a new kind of tension, not the quiet, crackling silence of before, but the heavy, oppressive atmosphere that follows a battle. Olivia and Michael moved through their shared space like ghosts from warring nations, their interactions minimal, functional, and freighted with the weight of their last explosive argument. Leo, intuitive and observant, retreated into himself, his post-camp ebullience replaced by a watchful quiet. He saw the fault line that had fractured his home, and it scared him. The sight of his quiet anxiety was a constant, twisting knife in Olivia's gut. The decision to attend the gala wasn't really a decision at all. It was a capitulation. To refuse would be to declare open war on Eleanor, a war that would inevitably engulf Leo. Olivia imagined the fallout, the pointed questions from his friends whose parents were Eleanor's allies, the subtle social ostracism that Maple Creek did so well. Attending felt like the lesser of two evils, a strategic retreat to protect her son. It was a choice made of fear and maternal instinct, and it felt like swallowing glass. She called Chloe, her voice flat with resignation. "I'm going." "Liv, no, why?" Chloe's voice was a mix of disbelief and frustration. "You'll be walking into the lion's den wearing a steak dress." "It's for Leo," Olivia explained, the words tasting like an excuse even to her own ears. "If I don't go, Eleanor will make it worse. She'll paint me as the one who refuses to reconcile, the one tearing the family apart. It will get back to him. I can't let that happen." "So you're just going to let her win?" "This isn't about winning," Chloe said wearily. "This is about surviving until I can figure out how to get out." The words, spoken aloud for the first time, startled her. Get out. The thought had been a whisper, a shadow in the back of her mind. Now it was a solid, tangible thing. It was the first glimmer of a future that didn't involve this house, this town, this marriage. The night of the gala arrived with a crisp, autumnal chill that felt fitting. Summer's cloying humidity had finally broken, replaced by something sharp and clear. Olivia stood in front of her closet, staring at the row of dresses. They were costumes from a different life. The vibrant sheath she wore to a gallery opening with Michael, the elegant black gown from a New Year's Eve party years ago when they still danced together. She chose a dress of deep sapphire blue. It was simple, elegant, and severe. It felt like armor. As she did her makeup, she saw a stranger in the mirror. Her face was thinner, her eyes shadowed. The woman who had cried in her office over a string of text messages seemed a lifetime away.
In her place was someone harder, more brittle. Michael was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. He looked like the man on the cover of a magazine, the picture of success and stability. The dissonance between his appearance and the reality of their life was dizzying. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice quiet. It was an automatic compliment, a line from a script they no longer shared. "Let's just get this over with," she replied, walking past him toward the door. The drive to the Maple Creek Historical Society was silent. The building, a grand old Victorian mansion, was ablaze with lights. Valets in smart red jackets hurried to open car doors. The air buzzed with music and laughter. It was the picture of civic harmony, a perfect facade.
As they stepped out of the car, Olivia felt a wave of public scrutiny wash over her. It was as if a spotlight had found them. She could feel the glances, the subtle shifts in posture from the people milling on the grand porch. She squared her shoulders and lifted her chin, her hand resting lightly, impersonally, on Michael's arm as they walked up the steps. She was playing her part. Eleanor was waiting for them just inside the foyer, a vision in shimmering silver, her smile as bright and hard as a diamond. "There you are," she said, her voice ringing with performative warmth. She kissed the air near Olivia's cheek, her perfume a cloud of expensive florals. "You look wonderful, dear. Doesn't she look wonderful, Michael?" "Stunning," Michael murmured, his hand tightening for a second on Olivia's back. "Come, come," Eleanor said, taking them each by an arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "So many people are dying to say hello." She was parading them. It was exactly as Olivia had feared. Eleanor steered them through the crowded room, a queen presenting her reconciled airs. They were met with a chorus of relieved smiles and carefully enthusiastic greetings. "Eleanor, you must be so thrilled," one woman gushed. "It's so wonderful to see them looking so happy." "We're a strong family," Eleanor said, her voice resonating with pride. "We weather storms." Olivia felt a disorienting sense of detachment, as if she were floating above her own body, watching a scene from a movie. She smiled when she was supposed to smile, murmured pleasantries, and accepted compliments on her dress. Each interaction was a small tear in her soul. They weren't seeing her. They were seeing the story Eleanor had written for them. They were applauding her for her graceful capitulation. She found herself cornered by Brenda, the PTA gossip, whose eyes were wide with a kind of morbid curiosity. "Olivia, it's just so brave of you to be here," Brenda said, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "After everything you've been through, all that stress." "I'm fine, Brenda," Olivia said, her voice colder than she intended. "Of course you are," Brenda said, patting her arm. "You're a Wallace woman after all." The words hit Olivia with the force of a physical blow. A Wallace woman. It was the brand Eleanor had been burnishing, the identity she was trying to force upon her. A woman who tolerates, who forgives, who prioritizes the family name above her own dignity. She needed to escape. Excusing herself, she slipped away from the chattering crowd and found a deserted hallway that led to a small, dark library. The room smelled of old paper and lemon polish. It was blessedly quiet. She leaned against a bookshelf, closing her eyes, trying to breathe. She felt like a fraud. She had come here for Leo, but in doing so, she was betraying herself. Every smile, every nod was a lie. It was an endorsement of the fiction that had been created around her. She heard footsteps in the hall. The door to the library opened, and Michael stepped inside, closing it softly behind him. "Are you okay?" he asked. "No, Michael, I'm not okay," she said, her voice low and fierce. "I am suffocating. This whole night is a lie. We are a lie. I know it's hard," he said, taking a step closer. "But look at it from my mother's perspective. She's trying to hold everything together." "Stop," Olivia said, holding up a hand. "Stop defending her. Stop making excuses. For once, just see this from my perspective. Your mother has orchestrated this entire evening to erase what you did. She has turned me into a supporting actress in my own tragedy, and you just let her. What was I supposed to do? The right thing, she whispered, her voice cracking. You were supposed to do the right thing. You were supposed to protect me, not your reputation. You were supposed to be my husband. He had no answer. He just stood there, his handsome face a mask of misery and impotence. In that moment, Olivia saw him with perfect, heartbreaking clarity. He wasn't a monster. He was just a weak man. A man who had chosen the path of least resistance his entire life, a path paved by his mother's influence and his own fear of confrontation. He had broken their marriage out of weakness, and now he was letting his mother try to glue it back together with the same weakness. I can't do this anymore, Michael, she said, the realization settling into her bones, solid and irreversible. I can't live in this lie. I can't be a Wallace woman. Before he could respond, the library door swung open again. Eleanor stood in the doorway, her smile gone, her eyes like chips of ice. There you are, she said, her voice dangerously pleasant. The photographer from the Ledger is here. He wants a family shot for the society pages. Come along now, both of you. It was the moment of truth, the ultimate command performance. All the pain, humiliation, and rage of the past weeks culminated in this one simple request, a photograph, a single, glossy image to cement the lie for all of Maple Creek to see. The request hung in the silent library, an ultimatum disguised as a social pleasantry. Come along now. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. Eleanor's gaze was fixed on Olivia, a silent challenge. Michael looked from his mother to his wife, his expression a portrait of helpless indecision. He was caught, as always, between the two dominant forces in his life. Olivia looked at Eleanor, standing in the doorway like a sentinel guarding the entrance to a life she no longer wanted. She saw the years of striving for this woman's approval, the countless times she had bitten her tongue or smoothed over a conflict to keep the peace. She saw the carefully constructed cage of expectations she had allowed to be built around her. The sapphire dress felt less like armor and more like a costume for a role she was finally refusing to play. The photographer, a young man with a flash-battered camera, hovered just behind Eleanor, a visible manifestation of the public pressure. This was it, the grand finale of Eleanor's production, the moment where the lie would be immortalized, printed, and distributed, becoming the official, sanctioned truth. Something inside Olivia shifted. It wasn't a loud, violent break, but a quiet, profound click, like a lock disengaging. It was the release of a burden she hadn't even realized she was carrying, the burden of other people's expectations. She took a slow breath, the scent of old books and dust filling her lungs. It smelled like truth. She looked directly into Eleanor's unblinking eyes. No, she said. The word was quiet, almost a whisper, but it landed in the room with the force of a thunderclap. It was a complete sentence, a declaration. Eleanor's perfectly composed face faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of disbelief, then irritation. I'm sorry, she said, as if she had misheard. I said no, Olivia repeated, her voice clearer this time, firmer. I will not be in the photograph. Michael let out a small, strangled sound. Liv, don't, he pleaded, his voice a low hiss. Not here. Especially here, Olivia said, her gaze never leaving her mother-in-law. I will not stand there and smile and pretend that this family is whole when it is broken. I will not be a part of this performance anymore. Eleanor's face hardened, the socialite smile vanishing completely, replaced by a mask of cold fury. She took a step into the room, lowering her voice to a venomous whisper that only they could hear. Do you have any idea what you are doing? You are making a scene. You are embarrassing this family. Your family. No, Olivia corrected her, a strange sense of calm settling over her. The fear was gone,
burned away by the clean fire of her resolve. What's embarrassing this family is the lie we are being forced to live. What you're doing right now, trying to bully me into a photo op to save face, is what's embarrassing. She turned her head slightly to look at Michael, who stood frozen, a statue of a man. "And you," she said, her voice laced not with anger anymore, but with a deep, profound sadness. "Your affair was a betrayal, but your silence, your letting this happen to me, to us, that is the real cowardice." She had said it all. The truth, unvarnished and raw, in this quiet, dusty room. The air was thick with it. Without another word, Olivia walked toward the door. She moved with a newfound grace, her spine straight. She met the photographer's startled gaze with a calm, steady look. She brushed past Eleanor, who was momentarily stunned into immobility. The matriarch of Maple Creek, for the first time in memory, was speechless.
Olivia didn't run. She walked with deliberate steps through the crowded ballroom. She was aware of the heads turning, the conversations faltering as she passed. She was a woman in a sapphire dress, walking alone, away from her husband and her mother-in-law, who remained in the dark library. Her exit was not loud or dramatic, but it was a tectonic shift. It was the public dismantling of the Wallace facade, and she was the one holding the hammer. She didn't look back. She walked out of the historical society, past the laughing couples and the popping flashbulbs, and into the crisp, cold night air. She felt a lightness in her chest, a sense of liberation so potent it almost made her dizzy. She had not won a fight. She had simply refused to participate in it any longer. She had walked off the stage. She pulled out her phone, her fingers steady, and called the one person she knew would understand. "Chloe?" she said when her friend answered. "Liv, what's wrong? Did you leave?" "I'm out front," Olivia said, a small, genuine smile touching her lips for the first time in what felt like an eternity. "Can you come get me?" "I'm putting my shoes on. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Chloe said without hesitation. Olivia stood on the curb, the sounds of the gala a muffled beat behind her. She watched the cars come and go, their headlights cutting through the darkness. She had no idea what would happen next, what wreckage her quiet act of defiance had caused. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She was just a woman, standing alone under the vast starry sky, waiting for her ride out of Maple Creek. She was finally writing her own story, and this was the first sentence. The 20-minute drive to Chloe's apartment in Chicago felt like a journey across a continent. With every mile that separated her from Maple Creek, Olivia felt the suffocating weight of the town and its expectations begin to lift. The manicured lawns and identical colonials gave way to the chaotic, vibrant sprawl of the city, and the change in scenery was a balm to her fractured psyche. Chloe lived in a loft in the West Loop, a space with exposed brick walls, soaring ceilings, and huge factory windows that looked out onto the glittering, restless cityscape. It was the antithesis of Olivia's house, messy, creative, and unapologetically real. Chloe met her at the door with a hug that was fierce and enveloping. She didn't pepper Olivia with questions. She just held her, then led her inside, handed her a glass of wine, and pointed her toward a ridiculously comfortable, oversized armchair. "Okay," Chloe said, sinking onto the couch opposite her. "Tell me everything." And Olivia did. The story poured out of her, not in the frantic, sobbing torrent of her first call to Ben, but in a steady, clear-eyed recitation of the facts. The gala, Eleanor's command, the library, the quiet finality of the word no. As she spoke, she felt a sense of ownership over the events. They were no longer things that had happened to her. They were things she had navigated, choices she had made. "Damn, Liv," Chloe said when she finished, a slow smile spreading across her face. "That's the bravest thing I've ever heard. You didn't just walk away. You took a wrecking ball to the whole charade." "It didn't feel brave," Olivia confessed, swirling the wine in her glass. "It just felt necessary, like I couldn't breathe another lungful of that air." The act of defiance, so powerful in the moment, was followed by an inevitable and crushing emotional hangover. The adrenaline receded, leaving behind a vast, empty space. In the safety of Chloe's apartment, away from the prying eyes of Maple Creek, the full weight of her situation descended. Her marriage was over. Her home was a place she could no longer return to, not in the same way. Her son was caught in the middle of a war she had just escalated. The strength she had felt walking out of the gala crumbled, and she began to cry. Not the angry, frustrated tears of before, but deep, shuddering sobs of grief. It was a mourning for the life she had lost, for the man she thought she had married, for the future she had so carefully designed, now lying in ruins. Chloe let her cry, sitting with her in the quiet solidarity of true friendship. When the tears subsided, leaving Olivia exhausted and hollowed out, Chloe simply said, "You can stay here as long as you need. This is your safe house."
The next morning, Olivia woke up on the guest futon to the sound of city traffic and the smell of strong coffee. For a moment, she was disoriented, the unfamiliar sounds and light confusing her. Then, the memory of the gala rushed back, and with it, a fresh wave of anxiety. What was happening back in Maple Creek? What was the fallout? Her phone, which she had silenced, lay on the nightstand. It showed 17 missed calls and over 30 text messages. The majority were from Michael. A handful were from a number she didn't recognize, and one, ominously, was from Eleanor. She couldn't bring herself to listen to the voicemails. She scrolled through the texts from Michael, her heart pounding. They were a frantic progression of emotions. "Where are you? Please call me. Liv, we need to talk. This is a disaster. My mother is furious. You can't just disappear. Please, just tell me you're safe. This is not the way to handle this. You're being childish. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. Just come home. We can fix this." The messages were a perfect encapsulation of Michael. Panic, blame, a flash of anger, and then a weak, desperate attempt at reconciliation. He still didn't get it. He thought this was a problem that could be fixed, a negotiation that could be won. She ignored his messages and opened the one from Eleanor. It was short and glacial. "You have made a grave miscalculation, Olivia. You would do well to remember where your loyalties should lie." It wasn't a plea or an attack. It was a threat, a queen reminding a rebellious subject of her power. Olivia's hand was shaking as she put the phone down. The relative peace of Chloe's apartment felt like a temporary shelter, a bubble that could be burst at any moment. The tendrils of Maple Creek were long. She spent the day in a fog. Chloe worked from her home studio, giving Olivia space but checking in periodically, leaving food and fresh coffee by her side. Olivia tried to read, to watch a movie, to do anything to distract her mind. But the toxic brew of guilt, fear, and grief was too potent. The biggest, most painful thought was of Leo. What was he thinking? What had Michael told him? The thought of her son waking up to find her gone, to find his home fractured beyond repair, was an agony unlike any she had ever known. She had to call him. Steeling herself, she dialed her home number. Michael answered immediately, his voice ragged. "Olivia?" "I need to speak to Leo," she said, her voice flat, brooking no argument. There was a pause. "He's at a friend's house," Michael said. "He's staying the night. It was better that way." The relief that Leo wasn't in the house was immediately replaced by a fresh pang of guilt. He had been shuffled off, displaced by their marital chaos. "What did you tell him?" "I told him you had a family emergency," Michael said wearily, "that you had to go help your parents." He was worried. A family emergency. Another lie, another patch on a crumbling facade. "Michael, this can't go on," she said, the words coming from a place of deep exhaustion. "The lies, the performances, it's over." "So what does that mean?" he asked, and for the first time, she heard genuine fear in his voice. Not fear of his mother or of public opinion, but fear of the finality in her tone. Are you leaving me?" The question, so direct and simple, hung between them. Olivia looked around Chloe's messy, vibrant loft. She thought of her own pristine, silent house in Maple Creek, a place that had become a prison. She thought of the woman in the sapphire dress walking out into the cold night air, leaving a world of lies behind her. "I already have," she said, and the words were the truest she had spoken in years. The conversation with Michael left a ringing silence in its wake. The admission, "I already have," was a door slamming shut on a huge portion of her life. The finality of it was both terrifying and liberating. There was no going back. She knew she couldn't hide in Chloe's apartment forever. She had to face the consequences of her choices, and more importantly, she had to see her son. But the thought of returning to the house on Poplar Lane, to the suffocating atmosphere of Maple Creek, felt impossible. She needed a neutral ground, a space where she could begin the painful process of untangling her life from Michael's without the looming presence of Eleanor or the judgmental eyes of the town. That evening, as Chloe sketched at her work table and Olivia stared out the window at the endless river of headlights below, a plan began to form. It was a fragile, embryonic thing, but it was a plan nonetheless. "I need a lawyer," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the loft. Chloe looked up, her expression serious. "Yeah, you do. A shark. A great white." "And I need a therapist," Olivia added, the thought surprising her. She, the architect of orderly spaces, had a mind in complete disarray. The idea of professional help, once something she might have considered a sign of weakness, now seemed like a practical necessity, like hiring a structural engineer to assess a damaged building. "Good," Chloe said, nodding. "That's smart, Liv. You've been through a trauma." The word trauma resonated. It wasn't an overstatement. The slow, creeping betrayal, the gaslighting, the public shaming, the destruction of her family, it was a trauma, a deep psychological wound. The next few days were a blur of pragmatic action. Chloe, a master of navigating the urban landscape, found her a list of top-rated divorce attorneys and therapists specializing in life transitions. Olivia spent hours on the phone, her voice gaining strength and clarity with each call. She was no longer a victim reacting to events. She was a woman taking control of her future. She found a lawyer named Catherine Reed, a woman whose calm, no-nonsense demeanor immediately put her at ease. During their first consultation in a sterile downtown office building, Olivia laid out the entire story, from the texts on the iPad to the showdown at the gala. Catherine listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When Olivia finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Well," she said, her voice dry, "this is a classic high-conflict, high-asset suburban divorce with a narcissistic matriarch thrown in for good measure. I've seen it 100 times." The clinical summary was strangely comforting. Her unique, personal hell was a recognizable pattern. She wasn't alone. "Your primary concern right now is your son and establishing a stable environment for him," Catherine advised, "and secondly, securing your financial independence. Your husband and his mother have already shown they will fight a public relations war. We will fight a legal one, quietly, methodically, and effectively." The other crucial call was to a therapist Chloe had recommended, Dr. Anya Sharma. Her voice on the phone was warm and intelligent. Olivia booked her first appointment. It felt like setting a splint on a broken bone. The most difficult task was arranging to see Leo. She called Michael, and their conversation was stilted and businesslike. They were already beginning the awkward dance of co-parenting from separate lives. They agreed she would pick Leo up from school on Friday and have him for the weekend. They would tell him, together, that they were separating. The thought made Olivia's stomach clench with dread. On Friday, she rented a car and drove back to Maple Creek. As she crossed the town line, a familiar anxiety began to creep in. The perfectly green lawns, the stately houses, they no longer looked beautiful. They looked sinister. The entire town felt like enemy territory. She waited in the car line at Leo's middle school, her heart hammering. When he emerged from the building, his backpack slung over his shoulder, he looked smaller than she remembered. He scanned the line of waiting cars, his face anxious. When he saw her, his expression was a complicated mix of relief and confusion. He got into the car and was uncharacteristically quiet. "Where's Dad?" he asked. "He's at home," Olivia said, trying to keep her voice even. "You're staying with me for the weekend. We're going to stay in the city, at Aunt Chloe's." "Why?" he asked, his eyes fixed on her, searching. "Is everything okay with Grandma and Grandpa?" The lie had run its course. "Everything is fine with them, sweetie," she said gently. "But your dad and we need to talk to you about something." The conversation happened an hour later on a park bench overlooking Lake Michigan. Michael had driven into the city to meet them, a testament to the gravity of the moment. They sat on either side of Leo, a physical representation of the new family geometry. "Leo," Michael began, his voice thick with emotion, "you know that your mom and we haven't been getting along very well lately." Leo just nodded, his gaze fixed on a distant sailboat. "We've decided that it would be best if we didn't live in the same house anymore," Olivia continued, her own voice trembling. "We're going to be separating." "You're getting a divorce?" Leo asked, the word sounding foreign and clinical coming from his mouth.
"Yes," Michael said softly, "but Leo, this has absolutely nothing to do with you. You are the most important thing in the world to both of us. We both love you more than anything." They gave him the scripted reassurances, the ones they had rehearsed. "We'll both always be your parents. You'll have 2 homes now. We will always be a family." The words felt thin and inadequate, a flimsy net trying to catch the weight of a child's collapsing world. Leo didn't cry. He just sat there, absorbing the information with a stoicism that was more heartbreaking than tears. He seemed to shrink into himself, the carefree energy of summer completely gone. When Michael finally stood up to leave, he hugged Leo tightly. Then he looked at Olivia, his eyes filled with a sorrow so deep it momentarily erased her anger. "I'm so sorry, Liv," he whispered, a confession meant only for her. She just nodded, unable to speak. As she and Leo walked away from the bench, he finally slipped his hand into hers. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. It was an anchor in the storm. That night, in the quiet of Chloe's guest room, Olivia sat with Dr. Sharma for their first virtual session. She recounted the day, the pain of telling her son, the hollowness in her chest. "Olivia," Dr. Sharma said, her voice calm and steady through the laptop speaker, "you have spent years designing homes for others, creating structures of safety and comfort. Now, you must do the same for yourself. But this time, you are not just the architect, you are also the foundation. The work is to rediscover how strong that foundation truly is." The metaphor resonated deep within her. The blueprints of her old life were gone. She was standing on an empty plot of land, the rubble of her past at her feet. The task ahead was overwhelming, terrifying, but for the first time, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a very long time, the quiet, determined hope of a builder ready to break ground. The weeks that followed were a study in deconstruction. Olivia's life, once a single, cohesive structure, was being dismantled piece by piece. The process was messy, painful, and punctuated by moments of startling clarity. Her sessions with Dr. Sharma became a vital scaffolding, allowing her to examine the wreckage of her marriage without being crushed by it. "You described yourself as a peacekeeper," Dr. Sharma said during one session. "Let's explore that. A peacekeeper often maintains peace at their own expense. They absorb conflict so others don't have to feel it. When did you learn that role?" Olivia thought back to her childhood, to her quiet, gentle parents who abhorred confrontation. She thought of her early years with Michael, of smoothing over his occasional arrogance with a joke, of apologizing for his bluntness to friends. And most of all, she thought of her relationship with Eleanor, a long 19-year performance of appeasement. "I think I've been doing it for so long, I forgot it was a choice," Olivia admitted. "It just became who I was." "But it's a role, not an identity,"
Dr. Sharma gently corrected. The woman who walked out of that gala was not the peacekeeper. Who was she? She was just me, Olivia whispered, the simple truth of it landing with quiet force. The legal process was a different kind of deconstruction. It was cold, methodical, and stripped of emotion. Catherine Reed, her lawyer, was a master of this sterile demolition. She communicated with Michael's high-powered attorney through formal letters and emails, building a case for a fair settlement. The house on Poplar Lane, the investment accounts, the retirement funds, their shared life was reduced to a series of assets on a spreadsheet. The most contentious issue was the house. Michael, at Eleanor's insistence, initially wanted to keep it. It was the Wallace homestead, the physical symbol of their family's standing in Maple Creek. The house is not just a house to them, Catherine explained to Olivia. It's a monument to their image. They won't give it up easily. But Olivia knew she couldn't live there. The place was haunted by ghosts of a life that was a lie. More importantly, she didn't want to be tied to Maple Creek, to the constant scrutiny and the whispers. Sell it, Olivia told Catherine, her voice firm. I don't want it. I want my half of the value, and I want to be free of it. This decision sent a shockwave through the Wallace camp. For Eleanor, it was an act of sacrilege, a deliberate torching of the family shrine. It was, Olivia realized with a grim sense of satisfaction, another refusal to play her assigned part. Her weekends with Leo were her sanctuary. They explored Chicago, escaping the gravitational pull of the suburbs. They went to museums, ate deep dish pizza, and walked along the lakefront. In these moments, away from the conflict, she could see glimpses of the old Leo, the boy who wasn't carrying the weight of his parents' failure. But the sadness was always there, a shadow in his eyes. One Saturday afternoon, as they sat in a small cafe, he asked the question she had been dreading. "Is it because of Dad's mom?" he asked, stirring his hot chocolate. "Is Grandma Eleanor why you left?" Olivia chose her words carefully, a skill she was honing in her sessions with Dr. Sharma. "Grandma Eleanor and I, we have very different ideas about things, sweetie. But the reasons your dad and I are separating are between us. It's grown-up stuff that is not your fault and not your burden to carry." It was an imperfect answer, but it was an honest one. She would not poison him against his grandmother or his father. Her battle was her own. She would not conscript her son into it. The media circus, which had quieted after the gala, flared up again with the news of the impending divorce and the sale of the house. The Maple Creek Ledger ran another story, this time with a more somber tone. Wallace's to divorce. Poplar Lane landmark on the market. The article was peppered with quotes from sources close to the family who expressed sadness over the irreconcilable differences and Olivia's decision to start a new life in the city. The narrative was subtle but clear. Olivia was the one who had left, the one who had dismantled the family. She read the article and felt a flicker of the old anger, but it was distant now, like heat lightning on a far-off horizon. It didn't have the power to burn her anymore. "They're still trying to write your story for you," Chloe said, reading over her shoulder. "Let them," Olivia replied, closing the laptop. "I'm the only one who knows how it really ends." Her own new beginning was starting to take shape. She found a small, 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood in Chicago, a place with good schools for Leo. It was a fraction of the size of the house on Poplar Lane, but when she walked through the empty rooms, all she felt was potential. It was a blank canvas. She also began to think about work. The Henderson project had been finished and handed off to another architect at her old firm. For months, she hadn't been able to even look at a blueprint. But now, the urge to create was returning, a slow, steady pulse. She started sketching again, not for clients, but for herself. She designed small, efficient, beautiful spaces, homes for people who valued light and air more than square footage. The designs were honest, uncluttered, and free of pretense. They were a reflection of the life she was trying to build for herself. The demolition phase was nearing its end. The foundations of her new life were being poured, quiet and unseen, but strong and getting stronger every day. The day they signed the final divorce papers was gray and drizzly, the Chicago sky the color of wet cement. The meeting took place in a neutral conference room in Catherine Reed's office building, a space so generic it felt like it existed outside of time. Olivia saw Michael for the first time in weeks. He looked tired and diminished. The confident, charismatic aura he had always projected was gone, replaced by a quiet, weary resignation. He had lost weight, and there were new lines around his eyes. The consequences of his actions were no longer an abstract concept. They were etched onto his face. They sat on opposite sides of a long, polished mahogany table, their lawyers flanking them like seconds in a duel that had already been lost by both sides. The signing itself was anticlimactic. A flurry of paper, the scratching of pens, the formal exchange of documents. In the space of 15 minutes, a 19-year marriage was legally dissolved. When it was over, Catherine and Michael's lawyer discreetly left the room, leaving the two of them alone for the first time since the night of the gala. The silence was heavy, filled with the ghosts of 1,000 shared memories. "The house sold," Michael said finally, his voice low. "It went fast. A family from California." "That's good," Olivia said. It was strange to think of another family living within those walls, another life unfolding in the rooms where she had raised her son, where she had discovered the betrayal that had upended her world. "My mother is not taking it well," he added, a wry, humorless twist to his lips. "She sees it as a personal defeat." "It was never about winning or losing, Michael," Olivia said, her voice gentle. There was no anger left, only a profound, aching sadness. "I know that now," he said, looking at her directly for the first time. His eyes were filled with a remorse that felt, finally, genuine. It wasn't the scripted apology of a man who'd been caught. It was the deep, hollow regret of a man who understood what he had thrown away. "I was a coward, Liv. You were right. I let you down. I let Leo down. I was so afraid of, I don't even know what. Afraid of not being the person everyone thought I was, I guess. Especially my mother." He looked down at his hands, resting on the polished table. "The thing with Ava, it was a symptom of a deeper problem. I was lost. But instead of trying to find my way back home, I just got more lost, and I let you take the blame for it all. I am so sorry for that. For all of it." The apology, so long in coming, landed softly in the quiet room. It wasn't a magic wand. It couldn't erase the pain or undo the damage. But it was a truth, finally spoken. It was an acknowledgement of her reality, a validation of the hurt she had endured. "Thank you for saying that," Olivia said, her throat tight. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, and she wiped it away. It was a tear of release, not of sorrow. I hope one day you can be happy, Liv," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm working on it," she replied. "You should too, Michael. A happiness that's your own, not one that's designed to please someone else." He nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. They stood up, the meeting concluded. As they walked to the door, a final, unspoken question hung in the air. This was the end of their story as husband and wife. A new, undefined chapter as co-parents was about to begin. Olivia walked out of the office building and into the damp city air. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of watery sunlight was breaking through the clouds. She felt a profound sense of closure. The war was over. The narratives, his and hers, Eleanor's and the town's, had finally converged on a single, quiet truth in that conference room. She didn't feel victorious. She just felt free. The heavy armor she had been wearing for so long had been set down. She was lighter. She hailed a cab to take her to her new apartment, the empty space that was waiting to be filled with her life, her son's life, a life of her own design. Months later, spring arrived in Chicago, not with a sudden burst, but with a hesitant, fragile grace. Pale green buds appeared on the trees outside Olivia's apartment window, and the air, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, held a trace of warmth and the earthy smell of damp soil. The changing of the season felt like a reflection of her own internal landscape. The long, bleak winter of her grief was beginning to thaw. Her new apartment was no longer an empty space. It was a home. It was filled with a mix of old, carefully chosen pieces from her past life and new, simpler furniture she had bought herself. Her drafting table sat in a corner of the living room, bathed in the morning light from a large window. It was covered, not with blueprints for sprawling suburban mansions, but with sketches for a project she had taken on pro bono, designing a small community arts center for an underserved neighborhood. The work was meaningful, challenging, and entirely her own.
Life had settled into a new rhythm. A rhythm defined by school runs with Leo, quiet evenings of work, weekend explorations of the city, and dinners with Chloe. The noise from Maple Creek had faded to a distant murmur. She rarely thought about the gossip, the stares, the suffocating judgment. It was a chapter from a book she had already finished reading. Leo was adjusting. He was still quieter than he used to be, but the deep shadow of anxiety in his eyes had receded. He had made new friends at his school in the city, and he was thriving in an environment that was more diverse and less obsessed with appearances than Maple Creek. He spent Wednesday nights and every other weekend with Michael, who had moved into a small condo in a neighboring suburb. Their handoffs were civil, sometimes even friendly, focused solely on Leo's well-being. The raw, open wound of their divorce was slowly, painstakingly healing into a scar. One sunny Saturday afternoon in May, Olivia was sitting on a bench in a small park near her apartment, watching Leo play a pickup basketball game with some neighborhood kids. She was sketching in her notepad an idea for the art center's facade when a familiar figure approached. It was Eleanor. Olivia's heart gave a single hard jolt of surprise, a reflexive echo of old fear. She hadn't seen or spoken to her former mother-in-law since the night of the gala. Eleanor looked different here, away from her natural habitat of Maple Creek. She seemed smaller, less formidable, dressed in a simple trench coat instead of her usual power suits. "Hello, Olivia," she said, her voice quiet, lacking its customary authoritative ring. "Eleanor," Olivia replied, her voice steady. She closed her sketchbook. "What are you doing here?" "Michael told me where you lived. I was in the city for a meeting," she said, her gaze drifting toward the basketball court where Leo was laughing as he chased the ball. "He looks happy." "He is," Olivia said simply. Eleanor was silent for a long moment, watching her grandson. "I owe you an apology," she said finally, her eyes still on Leo. The words sounded stiff, as if they were difficult for her to form. I handled things badly. I thought I was protecting my family, my son." "You were protecting an image," Olivia corrected her, not with anger, but with the calm clarity of someone stating a fact. "You were so focused on the facade that you couldn't see that the foundation was crumbling." Eleanor flinched slightly, but she didn't argue. She turned her gaze to Olivia, and for the first time, Olivia saw not a matriarch or a strategist, but an older woman grappling with the consequences of her own rigidity. "I drove my son to be a man who was afraid to tell the truth," Eleanor admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "And I tried to turn you into a woman who was afraid to live it. I see that now. The house is gone. Michael is changed, humbled. And you," she looked at Olivia, truly looked at her. "You seem strong." "I am," Olivia said, and she knew it was true. Her strength wasn't the hard, brittle armor she had worn at the gala. It was something more flexible, more resilient, forged in the fire of her ordeal. "I don't expect your forgiveness," Eleanor said, pulling her coat tighter around herself. "I just wanted you to know that I was wrong." She turned to leave, but hesitated.
He's a good boy, Olivia. You're a good mother." With that, she walked away, a solitary figure disappearing down the city street. Olivia watched her go, a complex mix of emotions swirling inside her. There was no triumph, no satisfaction in Eleanor's admission. There was only a quiet, sad sense of an ending. The final ghost had been laid to rest. She turned her attention back to the park. Leo had just scored a basket, and he looked over at her, his face flushed and beaming with pride. He gave her a wide, uncomplicated grin, and she smiled back, her heart full. The sun was warm on her face. She opened her sketchbook again. On the clean white page, she began to draw. She wasn't designing a house built of wood and stone. She was designing a life, one built on a foundation of truth, resilience, and the quiet, unshakable strength she had found within herself. The blueprints were finally clear, and the future, like the blank page before her, was full of light and open space.